Hi, Corey. It's been a while.
Hey, buddy.
Feels like a while. You've been traveling the world.
Yes, exactly. Doing my
Crazy.
dirty business overseas.
Oh my goodness. You're crazy. How was it? Lots of flying.
I- 30 hours is a bit much. Like,
Oh,
I think yeah,
I wouldn't be able to walk.
yeah.
That'd be it. I'd be like, okay, we're carry me off the plane. And I'm a
Okay.
large man to carry off a plane.
So
First class,
anything
though?
over anything over 8, I get business class. So, but that wears after the first 10 hours, believe it or not.
Yeah,
Now,
I'm sure
mind
it
you, I
does.
think economy would have been more after the first like 20 minutes of in a plane, but
Yeah,
right up to
yeah,
the
yeah.
amputating my legs.
Yeah. And that's 30. I mean, you gotta you're puddle jumping though. I'm assuming at some point you're 8 hours on, and then where were you? Australia or something?
Not from Vancouver to Australia. That's 17 hours of plane, baby.
Oh
I
wow!
didn't
Did you
realize they
sleep?
had that
Were you
much.
able to sleep? I'm a good
Fitfully,
sleeper. I can sleep anywhere. Night night.
night. Well, they give you little kits, so that's the other cool part, right? Is I've got about half a dozen of the deluxe kits because they were in first class. They give you
Oh,
socks.
oh, right. Well, some people don't wear socks. They think I'm going to Australia. Plane's cold, man. You
They're
have
gonna take a
30,000
plane.
feet.
They're gonna take a plane and not wear socks. Like I
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it worked out well because when I had landed in Australia, I had another 6 hours in Brisbane. So I went off and turns out I had lounge access and they have showers. So after a 17-hour flight, I hopped into a shower and
Yeah. And your fellow, flight people probably felt good about that too. But you get a little smelly after a few hours there.
The planes were pretty climate controlled, but you
Yeah.
feel kind of gross after, because I had been traveling since, so it was a
I've
17
never
hour
been on a
flight.
plane that long. That's a
Okay.
long fucking time.
Well,
No,
Ottawa to
thank you.
Vancouver was, I think, 6 and a bit.
Yeah.
So there
Yeah.
was that.
But that's pretty, I mean, you fly 6 hours is okay. But like when you start getting into like 8, 10 hour flights, holy fuck.
But you add it all together. So it was like I was at Ottawa Airport for 2 hours, 6 hours
Right.
in a plane, Vancouver Airport. That's 10 hours right there. And you add that on to the 17. So all of a sudden it's 27 hours of traveling.
My God.
And I'm still not even there yet.
Right.
I didn't even know what day it was when I landed in Australia because they're like 16 hours ahead.
You left on a Thursday, you get there on a Wednesday.
It was or Sunday. I left on a Friday and got there on a Sunday, but it was actually Saturday and just, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like you're like, what the crap? I missed a day. What happened to Saturday? All right. Well, I'm glad you made it home safe and sound.
Me too.
I guess we should get into the show. Is that what we're doing here?
That's what we're doing here. Yeah. Long time.
All right. Well, let's get at it.
All right.
Welcome to the OC. I'm Phil. It's my co-host Corey, and we're talking about 0 units. This is not math.
So this is the problem doing this research on this is doing 0 units. Like, I don't want to know why 0 was such apparently this was one of the big concepts. Like a concept of nothing in math was revolutionary.
It was like we could have nothing.
Nothing. The concept of nothing existing, because how do you know nothing exists? It doesn't.
But you have to prove it. And in math, there's a way. But we're not talking about that because, well, I'm not very good at math, and neither are you. So, well, maybe you're pretty good.
You
used to be pretty good. You used to help me in math. Do you remember that?
Yeah, but actually, I remember Jody Stackelberg was helping me with algebra.
She was too smart. So
one of the things, yes, but so smart that couldn't reach my dumbness. Right? I was like, wait a second here. I know I got to balance both parts of the equation, but
it's when they look at you like, oh.
I know. It's like the way I look at people when we're asking me for computer help, and I'm like,
you're kidding me. You're so beneath me right now.
So I'd left click or right click. I'm like, I don't even know what you do because it's such a basic question. It's left click to select, right click to use options. But just anyway, the math thing is funny because we were, Melissa and I were out on yesterday and we were trying to figure out Luke Perry, right? He died.
Luke Perry died?
A while ago, yes.
How long ago?
I don't know, 2019. So
oh wow, I'm really out of the loop.
I believe you are. Anyway, we were trying to. It was the whole idea, like, how old was he? And I said, well, he wasn't very old. She goes, because I was explaining the idea that in Beverly Hills 90210, they had like 40-year-olds playing 15-year-olds. Like, there's a reason why we all have these messed up body images in high school, because all these shows have people who have flown through puberty and had cosmetic surgery playing people who are going through puberty and not having cosmetic surgery.
Right.
So, but just doing the math, I said, well, okay. I said, he was born at this time. He died at this time. I said, here's how I would do the math in my head to come out with his age.
Yeah. Well, what year was he born? He must have been like 50s when he
I want to say it was like 66.
He was 66.
No, it was born 66.
Oh, he was born. So he's 10 years older than me. Okay.
Yeah,
or you. We're both the same age. So,
correct.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway.
Right? I mean, it's so hard to tell. You look at any of these actors and actresses and you go, what's their actual age? Jesus Christ. You don't know. I mean, there's no way of knowing. But
some of them are well preserved. But not what we're talking about. The death of Luke Perry.
No.
Maybe that'll be another
the death of Luke.
Podcast.
Was it a conspiracy? Who knows?
Right. Was it legitimate? Was it Beverly Hills 902 that did it? Was it Dylan?
What?
I don't know.
I don't know either. All right. Back to zero units. So
yes. So
I was confused. I didn't know nothing about this as usual.
So for those who don't know, zero units in this particular case refer to the Afghan
CIA
special
trained.
The CIA trained Afghan commandos that would go around and engage in all sorts of shenanigans like night raids, which seems to be the one where they get the most trouble for. Turns out when a bunch of heavily armed commandos show up at your door, plant explosives outside and say, don't come out, otherwise we'll shoot you, and then blow open your door and come in and essentially say, it's
that's pretty much it. It's I suppose shenanigans will work, but it sounds pretty fucking out there to me. A lot of civilians died by way of these zero units, right?
So some details
from what I read anyway.
Well, this is it. So some details about the zero units here. 1 second. Let me pull up my notes. You look at the CIA in Afghanistan has engaged in shenanigans. Like, do you remember Rambo 3?
Vaguely.
Okay, the Mujahideen,
the Mujahideen,
became eventually the Taliban, who eventually flew planes.
Well, I mean, the CIA's been working. Well, I mean, like, if you look at Bin Laden, he worked with the CIA. They supplied him weaponry, and
it's infinitely more complex than that. I'm listening to a book called Ghost Wars.
Oh, okay. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's more complex.
And the author Stephen Cole talks about the so it's like the CIA, the Pakistani intelligence, which is the ISS, and the GDI, which is the Saudi intelligence. The amount of money they were dumping into Afghanistan at the time, and it essentially was not quite the precursor to this, because this was more of a you had.
It's like liberation, right? Like they were trying to liberate Afghanistan.
They were trying to liberate. In this case, this was not liberation, right? So the year zero units, their primary purpose was counterinsurgency.
Right. Yeah, from what I read anyway. I mean, it was sort of the stuff that the CIA or the military couldn't really get their. They didn't want to get their hands. They didn't want to get their hands dirty, so to speak. So a lot of it was CIA guided raids, right, on intelligence that they had received from whomever, that this was a legitimate target. But what would happen is that information was wrong, and these poor people were like, a family of 16 living in were shot down and killed.
Correct, right? And this is one of the challenges. So the original, I believe they were called national security units in Afghanistan, who were essentially trained by the CIA to do counterinsurgency and became the zero units. Right. And you have this element of how much accountability do you suppose there is when the CIA is using things like the classified war loophole? Did you read about that?
No.
Basically saying, classified. We can't tell you about that. Wait,
Well,
you
I
mean
think
all these
that's
mistakes?
everything is, yeah, like, I mean, really, like in any government, it's, oh, well, we can't really talk about that because that's, that's why we get all these redacted files when things are declassified. But
But
we
that's
still,
also the
we don't
problem,
want to,
isn't it?
yeah, well, of course it is. Of course.
How can you have accountability when it's like, I can't tell you.
Yeah.
I can't tell you.
There's
Don't
no
worry, we're handling it.
transparency when it's, nah, we're not, we're not telling you anything about this one. You don't want to know. It's for your ears only, whoever you are.
But this isn't the first time they've done it either. So the CIA has been involved in counterinsurgency programs. Now, I don't
probably
know
all over the world.
Oh yeah, well,
well, for the layman, because I didn't really understand this at first. So,
sure,
how did this come about? Like when you talk about the insurgents,
yep.
So there had to be a starting point where they actually go in and train people, right? So they decide.
We talking the insurgents or talking
the beginning of the zero units, because we go, oh yeah, there's zero units, but before they were zero units, they were like nothing units. They were just
they were so they had the idea of the national security units in Afghanistan, I believe the NSUs in the Afghan army, and they were essentially soldiers, right? Like
they were already soldiers. Yeah. Poorly trained, I suspect. Quasi.
So this is the problem, right? We want to go off and say, well, they're poorly trained because they're not a Green Beret or a SEAL. Okay, we're not saying they were special forces. They were soldiers, and a lot of people get confused when they talk about commandos, saying, "Oh, that's special forces." Like, not necessarily. Commandos were generally people you drop,
like Marines, like like the badasses. These are the guys.
They were like, often not your conventional soldiers.
We're gonna throw some bodies at this.
So we're gonna throw some bodies, but we usually throw smaller bodies, right?
Yeah,
so we send a bunch of guys,
crazy bodies.
Remember our airborne regiment?
Oh yeah, that got disbanded for being too crazy.
No, because we took a bunch of killers and said, "Hey, guess what? You're jail guards now." How did that work out?
Not good.
Right.
Welcome to. Well, there was the hazing. That was part of the airborne.
How do you turn people into killers?
Exactly.
This is the problem. We want people to be remorseless killers, and then we get upset
if you can't urinate on your own comrades in a pit of mud. What can you do?
How else are they going to learn to kill people?
Well, what was one of the things they would take their airborne wings and smash, like take the pin out and smash it onto their chest, and that was like, you made it. You're now airborne, and that was deemed as like a. And I'm thinking, you're putting a gun in this person's, or a knife or whatever is necessary to kill some other person, and you think that's extreme? Like, I don't know.
The damage you need to do to people to get them into this, and this is I'm not trying to defend any of this at all. I'm just saying that you're going to be doing this. So I don't know exactly, because again, this is not something there's a lot of detail on. So when you did your research, Phil, how much did you find? Like
not a lot. It was like, holy geez, like, well, obviously, like, there were some reporters from
the Intercept. There was an Intercept article.
The Intercept
article. Lindsay Billings. She did a bunch of
she actually did like fucking 5 years there, or some crazy stuff, because her mother and father were killed by these zero units, and so she had a grudge to find out, and she actually interviewed a bunch of the soldiers. Like there was so if you go online, what was her name again? Billingsley, right?
Lynn, like Lynzy Billing, and I was like, I'm like, is that a different? No, it looks like it's a unique spelling. And she was with Algae. I saw her with. So there was an Intercept article. There was ProPublica and Al Jazeera.
ProPublica was the other one. That's the one where she did the. Like she most of it that I read was on there.
There was an Australian fellow who also did some exposés. I was watching on Democracy Now, so this actually, slight aside here, doing the research on this one, I'm like, what kind of, like, am I going to get on a watch list looking at some of this stuff?
Because I'm like, Jesus Christ. Why is he looking us up?
That's right.
One of 4 viewers. What?
Yeah, so keep that in mind, folks, when you're watching this episode. Not that we're saying anything that's not readily available, but
I know you take that chance, right? But yeah, like she had that lady. I did most of my reading with her. Like there's quite a few articles that she but she spent time, and she actually interviewed some Army Rangers. So we say the CIA, but the CIA was just sort of the brains behind this, and then they would have special forces units,
Correct. And there's
SEAL teams,
well,
Green
because
Beret, Rangers.
you'll have the CIA handlers, right? The CIA
Yeah.
advisors, right? And they operate through the what is it? The oh god, it's not the information. I can't remember the name of it. There's a term for the. It's the Special Ops Activity Center. The SAC became what is it?
Never
Anyway, they move
trust
through
the
different
SAC.
units, but
Yeah.
a
Well, they
lot
would
of those.
assist in the zero units too, right? Like, so it'll be like zero units going to help, or you're going to assist. By assist, I assume back up, or they, you know, in the raid or whatever, you know, trying to extract.
A lot of zero units did take, like, they were the ones on point with these night raids. Now, and what was the point of the night raids, Phil?
Intel, right? They would be targets that would be like, you know, that may have particular information, or, you
A
know,
lot of people wound up dead, given the fact that you're going in to grab people. They seem to be awfully quick to kill people.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, they got a gun. It's like,
hey, listen. If you have no accountability and you are at all threatened, yeah, I could see totally pulling the trigger and saying,
or you're in a dead sleep, right? And people are smashing into your home. I, you know, obviously there's some like panic and terror. These aren't trained, for the most part, trained military people that you're invading, or, you know,
correct. And
so they're going to panic, run.
Some of them are legitimate insurgents. So this is the problem,
Yeah.
right? You don't know which ones are legitimate insurgents that you're coming into.
Right. Or just a big family that's living in a small hovel
that's wondering why a bunch of people are coming in with guns and blowing our door open. And, you know, and don't forget, Afghanistan is not particularly stable. So this aspect of,
oh no, they're used to like crazy shit happening at all times. Well, but then, so it was funny when, well, it's not funny, I guess, but most of these zero unit individuals, I think there was upwards of 5,000 of them in total.
Yeah, I heard a number that there were a significant amount. So
they were brought to the United States. So you take these killers.
So yes,
then, well, you helped us. And I guess this was part of, like, you know, you help. This was the incentive. You help us. And I mean, you got to have a carrot. You can't just go, oh, hey, you want to be part of this team?
So the number I heard about, now again, this is their families as well. So you don't just take the zero units themselves. So it's about 20,000 Afghans specifically involved in the zero units.
Yeah.
Were brought over to like
and they have big families. Like, these are people that they're not like North Americans. These are, you know, they're having 6 kids, 7 kids, you know, so it's a big family, and their safety is obviously in question if they're left behind, right? Because this is not something that the government of Afghanistan really wanted to see. You know,
well, nobody ever wants to see this.
No,
like, I don't think any government wants to see.
Yeah, their people slaughtered. Yeah, the numbers are that, I think they're probably really skewed. I think there's a lot more deaths.
So the number of official deaths. So do you want to start pulling up some actual numbers here with the
500 and something, or
so at least 452. So this is based on one of the Billings research.
Yeah.
So at least 452 civilians killed in 107 raids. And the numbers is almost certainly wrong. Like, meaning it should be bigger.
There's no question. There's no question. So, and those are the raids.
And this was just
we know about.
This was just apparently her tracking down one of the zero units, 02.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I don't know how many units. That's the thing, right? And it's funny because you talked about Vietnam, and so if we go and look at history, this isn't a new concept, right? What did you call it? What was the name of the project?
So it was called the Phoenix. It was called the Phoenix program, and this was essentially the CIA doing the exact same thing. So the Phoenix program, Vietnamese Chien Dich Pung Hoang, they actually have a patch.
Oh,
believe it or not.
Yeah. Nice.
Was designed and initially coordinated by the United States CIA during the Vietnam War, and involving American, Australian, and South Vietnamese militaries. So eventually it was transferred under another group, but the idea was that you were was designed to identify and destroy Viet Cong via infiltration, assassination, torture, capture, counterterrorism, and interrogation.
Right. Yeah.
And they neutralized through the program. The Phoenix neutralized 81,740 people suspected of VC membership,
Right.
of whom 26,369 were killed, and the rest surrendered or captured. And this was the idea of taking, you have your Vietnamese that were on your side, and you're training them to go off and because you don't
do
want
some
to horrible
shit and burn a village to the ground because it's a suspected VC. You know,
and your hands are clean, right?
Yeah. We didn't do it.
You're talking about it. Yeah, but you gave them the guns. You gave them the guns, said, here, go get this guy.
And the training.
Didn't do it.
And lots of training. Because, you know, like the Viet Cong, they were basically, I mean, the war was lost by the United States. Like they didn't win.
They won.
Well,
they won and they achieved their goals and left. Which we're not sure.
You think they did? Because I
they didn't. No, they didn't. I'm being facetious.
Oh, okay, totally did. Really good. Because they just dug in. You got to give it to the Vietnamese. You got to go, wow! Like the Americans threw, there were Canadians in Vietnam too. Our government, I believe, helped in some way, shape, or form. You know, like they threw a lot at this country. They blew it to pieces. And still couldn't fucking stop these guys. Like they lived on a handful of rice in a fucking dirt hole. And would come out and kill. Like there's you got to have some respect for the Vietnamese. I don't care who you are.
Now, mind you, they did lose a lot of manpower. So
of course, but they just didn't give up, and they weren't giving up. They were going to fucking do this till the end.
Correct. And what do you do? So what do you do as a country? Guess what? You do the exact same thing Russia winds up doing in Afghanistan. Why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? All we're doing is dumping boatloads of money. We can't prop up the government there.
How many caves can we look in before like, and that was like the Vietnamese. How many hills do we take? Right? How many locate, and then they just take it back 2 minutes later. Like,
but you can't get a field battle. So the problem is the insurgents aren't giving you the field battle you need to win.
That's right. That's right.
So you've got a base. Okay, great. And now all of a sudden, like we were in Myrtle Beach back in March, and we went to it was the USS Yorktown, Patriots Point.
Oh, okay.
And it's an aircraft carrier, but they also have like a Vietnam exhibit.
Oh, nice.
And they were showing how, for example, at the air bases, air bases. Okay, they're not an air base. It's a base with an airstrip, and you have the touch and goes. You'd have the touch and goes. So you'd have the plane coming in. It wouldn't stop because all this fire would be going around. Like, because remember, the Russians and the Chinese were also helping to fund. They did the exact same thing in Vietnam that the U.S. did in Afghanistan. They were like, you know what? If you guys are willing to fight, we'll give you some weapons.
We'll give you, they gave them all the old SKS.
But they would also give them some of the rockets. So you'd see the cargo planes to resupply the U.S. bases coming in and touching down, not stopping.
And throwing
but guys too, you'd have guys basically tucking and rolling out the back of these things. Like, guess what? You're deploying here. Land. Bye. You're right, exactly. Tuck and roll. We'll slow down.
We're gonna slow down to 65, and
we have to take back off again. By the way, so be these touch and goes. Insane.
Yeah, that's funny. Oh, my camera's there we go.
So you can see why that they would say, do we want to throw our own man and material? There was a government that the US was propping up, right?
Yeah, and that tends to be the way, right? That tends to be
the same thing happened in Afghanistan, which is what the Russians were doing, right? They were propping up the Marxist communist governments in Afghanistan. And
look at Ukraine, right? Look at Ukraine right now. Well, who's giving them weapons? Who's training them? Who's helping them?
So Ukraine's a bit more of a delicate political situation, but
it is. I'm just saying that, this is, if the Ukraine was left to its own devices, this war would have been over.
Not necessarily a good way. Yeah, because you're right.
Yeah, it would be fast. They didn't have the weapons. They didn't have the tanks.
It wasn't going to be as fast as the Russians originally thought, but
they dug in.
They couldn't continue fighting as they did. Like, they didn't start getting weapons until now. This is the one air quotes positive thing, is they didn't really start getting significant support until it's like, okay, yeah, all right. So you can win, like you can fight. Okay, so we'll start supporting you with it as opposed
Right,
to
right. Yeah, yeah.
right at the bat, right? And
Yeah.
the Russians had been supporting the separatists, since in the Donetsk region forever.
Right, right. Well,
But
and this is the age old thing. Like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
yeah,
For now,
true.
I
Yeah,
guess. Is
proxy
that
wars, proxy wars
you
are a
know?
thing. So Vietnam was a proxy war, and it's the insurgency angle. So the difference with the Ukraine situation and like Vietnam and the Afghanistan situation is you're dealing with an insurgency. You're not necessarily dealing with an invasion because
Mhm.
it's the own people that are coming against you.
Well, yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is, in any other time, would Ukraine want the help of America?
I
Right?
like free stuff, don't you?
Well, let's just say 25 years ago, Ukraine would have been like, fucking Americans. Now it's like, oh, we're friends.
That was okay. So the Afghanistan situation, FYI, back
Yeah.
in the era when the CIA was training up Al Qaeda,
Yeah.
right? That was there. Like, but the US was like, sure, they hate us, but they're fighting Russians. So
Yeah,
we
they
want to
hate
kill
them
Russians.
more.
They want to
So,
hate them more. So let's, let's
right.
enemy of me is more of an enemy of my enemy. Therefore, here's some Stinger missiles. Like it's
Here's some, yeah. Here, let's see
which
what
is
we can do.
not so this is not necessarily what was going on with this counterinsurgency effort with the zero units, but it was similar to the idea that you are training,
Mhm.
equipping, and directing.
No, yeah, you're basically the orchestra, or like the, what do you call that? With the guy the fucking
The
little,
conductor.
the, thank you.
Da, 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 da,
See?
da, da, da.
Or Benny Hill music, For those of
Yes.
you under the age of 30.
It was
uh,
the racy when they
oh
would go up.
my god. But it
Oh,
didn't. Do you remember like oh my, as a young boy watching Benny Hill, you're like, oh
British
my,
were so far ahead of us.
they were so far ahead of us. Yeah. Yeah, Benny Hill.
With their racy comedy. Racy comedy. There's the girl
Yeah.
in her
Oh,
underwear running around being chased by Benny Hill. A guy who's
unheard
a,
of.
a
Unheard
portly
of.
gentleman, in his
Look like
in his
Winston
midlife.
Churchill running around chasing. Remember the one with the duck in his pants?
No, I don't remember the one with the
He had a duck in his pants, and it's the duck would like bite at like these ladies' butts. And I was just like, that's hilarious.
That's hilarious.
You
I
don't
don't
get,
remember that. No, I
yeah.
don't remember that
You're gonna have to
episode.
Google it, I'm sure.
To remember the
That's but yeah, back to zero units.
yes, back to zero units. Yeah. So
Hmm.
long story short, basically the CIA, we could say the US, but it was predominantly the CIA, was training
I like how
counterinsurgency.
we differentiate between CIA and the United States.
Well, all I can say is if you ever get a chance, listen. I wish I could share it with you, but listen to Ghost Wars, and it talks about it, and it essentially sounds like when you give
They're their own country. Wow.
to say to their own country,
No.
it's the problem of oversight.
Well, they do
right?
have their own rules, and that was designed. That was like,
Well, the CIA was set up to basically prevent another Pearl Harbor. Okay, and you
right.
give them a letter saying, "I need you to do this."
Yeah.
And the oversight is it's really hard to do oversight on these kind of operations because first off, you have to know they're doing things, and they're probably not going out of their way to tell you. Like, look at the other shady stuff the U.S. was the CIA was up to. Remember Operation Midnight Climax? MK
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Ultra?
MK Ultra and all
You
the
think
other.
somebody had signed off on that in the White House? They were like,
Right.
we never said you could do that. They're like, no, you gave us this letter. Yeah, it said look into it, not.
Can you imagine being the president at that time, getting the report that this came out and being like, they were what?
What? What? Well, you gave them because you want them to act on their own initiative, right? And it depends.
Like the homeless? They were taking the homeless?
The homeless?
Mental institutions?
They were set up a brothel? A brothel? Wait, we were funding this?
Can you just imagine? All right. This is okay. Someone's got to talk to these people.
Why is Cinnamon on our payroll? Who is Cinnamon?
That's right.
I got an overtime request here.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much. It's almost comedic how much Like you just go, wow. Okay.
But that's what when I say I make the distinction between the CIA and
Mhm.
the US, that now are they operating rogue? I I'm not going to go off and say that, because technically, if you operate rogue, and I think the what was it, Ollie North got nailed with this. So
Mhm.
theoretically, that's the case of, hey, they were treasonous, which is how you get nailed for
I
operating rogue.
guess.
You did
But
treason against the country. You did something you shouldn't have done.
these
Well, okay.
clandestine programs and stuff that nobody know, like it's plausible deniability, so that the government. So then how do you slap their PPs when it's like, yeah, you just kind of go and do your own thing, just keep it in the shadows.
Well, and you don't tell me. So if like
You don't tell me, I don't know.
you don't tell me, I don't know, and
I
I
don't
gave you
ask.
direction, and you used your own initiative. So one of the sad parts about the zero unit thing is, um, they talk about military planners baked collateral damage into the pre-raid calculus. How many women, children, non-combatants were at risk if the raid went awry?
Mm,
And they were usually wildly off, and not in a good way,
right.
and nobody seemed to really care.
No, there was no cares. No, unfortunately. But I mean, this is there's not enough information about, because there's nothing opened up. I mean, obviously the Afghans aren't going to open up about this, or the
And certainly not the ones that now, I think,
yeah,
as stuff gets declassified, because I want to say they're classified for like 25 years. Like we're finding out stuff about the Phoenix program, for example, because it's all been, well, not all, but it's been
probably not
declassified
all.
ish,
No.
right? Now,
Yeah.
the origin of the term zero unit. Do you know where that
No,
comes from?
no, not at all.
So super simple. There are four of them: 01, 02, 03, 04. Zero units. Now,
Oh,
I don't think they're officially designated zero units by the CIA, because we don't know what they call them. They probably have a
no.
cool name like Shiver Cobweb
Uh, they called
or
them the Mohawks. So they used.
I had read,
Did you read about
that,
that? The
and I wasn't
Mohawks.
sure. So when I was looking at that, I was like, wait a second. Is that
There
what
was
they were
code name Mohawks or
and,
Mohawk or
and I don't
something.
know if that was a codename program. So I tried to find some details on that, and maybe you had better luck than I did
No, I didn't really have
about,
much luck. It was just that was
is
their
that the name
original.
for their, hey, we're going to have counterinsurgency units. It
Yeah,
doesn't
send in the
matter where they were.
Mohawks.
Sending them,
Yeah,
like, we're in wherever, we're in Canada. We need counterinsurgency units in Canada. Okay, let's create the Mohawks.
yeah.
Like
So I don't know.
like
I mean,
Operation
they have
Mohawk.
code names for. I mean, they can call it Pink Umbrella for all I know. I mean,
You and your pink
I
umbrella.
like Pink Umbrella, whatever. So, um, but other than that, there's not much more like that we could. I didn't find a lot of information. Like I said, those articles, the interceptor.com was pretty good, and what was it?
ProPublica. So I kept saying ProPublica.
It's
And I was like,
ProPublica, yeah. And that
ProPublic.
was
So the three, technically four sources. So five sources. Okay. So the sources I wound up using was, okay, this actually comes back
and you're
around
gonna put
to,
that on the website, right? Yeah, it
oh
was
yeah. I got my links in my
yeah, it's
somebody reads my
Billings.
notes. Yeah,
The
Lindsay
Lindsay
Billings,
Billings.
but
Spelled
it's,
weird
yeah,
spelling of Lindsay.
correct. But
Lynzy. Sorry.
the whole idea of, I think they're all relating to the exact same
They
core
are.
stuff. So it
Yeah.
was ProPublica, Al Jazeera, Democracy Now, Human Rights Watch, and The Intercept.
Gotcha.
So,
And
I
they were
think they all
they
pointed
were
the
all
same way.
very similar. Like I read it, I was like, okay, this was a tough one. So that
Not probably the best choice as far as I'm concerned for this.
no. Well, but I mean, it's interesting. I find it interesting, but at the same time, so do you want to just wrap in a nutshell? Give us
okay.
0 units. What's a zero
units?
unit?
0 units are the designation for the the CIA trained Afghan commando units that originally were national security units designed to counter insurgency in Afghanistan.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, and they are renowned, or at least, it seems a lot of cases of, for human rights abuses and outright murder, because you're
Yeah.
going to go off and do stuff.
You give them that kind of power, there's going to be some
No accountability, and them and their families were successfully evacuated to the U.S. at the end of the Afghanistan conflict.
Living in Tampa Bay right now. living the good life, I suppose.
Living the good life.
Living in the land of milk and honey and McDonald's.
Yeah, and we won't know the full details. This is very similar to other shenanigans the CIA has engaged in the past, like the Phoenix program in Vietnam, and we won't know the full details of
25
exactly what. And yeah, until it's all been declassified, or until
hell freezes over. One of the two.
Well, true.
There you go. Well, what are we doing next week?
Wait, why do I have to pick? Didn't I go? Don't you get to pick something?
No, I thought we had a theme going.
Well, okay, we had a theme, but we've talked about. Okay, let's see. We talked about. Let's see. We covered the Wagner Group, UFO Shag Harbor. We covered 0 units. How about? Oh, geez. Let's see. Maybe we do now. The question is, do we want to continue on this particular theme, or do we want to? Let's do something different.
Let's do something different. I'm military is fascinating, but it's yeah.
Okay. How about voodoo?
Well, I like voodoo. Voodoo, you do. All right. Well, that sounds good. Let's do voodoo.
So next
voodoo is
week
very
or next
broad,
time?
But
it is, but
we can get jiggy with it.
It breaks it up. We've been very practical as of late, so let's get something that's a little bit impractical.
All right, let's do that. Well, thank you very much for watching the OC. I'm Phil. This is Corey, and until next week, we will voodoo you later. I don't know.
It's not even fun. I don't
know even know what that
is. Yeah, well, whatever
voodoo,
he said.
Voodoo, you do. Well, you have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Take care, folks.